Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard brought to you by our sponsor, The Great Game of Business. I'm Loren Feldman, and today my guest is Ami Kassar, who is founder and CEO of MultiFunding. Ami is an all-around expert on small business finance who has been a guest here many times before. Welcome back, Ami.
Loren, always a pleasure to be with you, my friend.
Always a pleasure to have you here. Ami, as we record this, the debt ceiling bill seems to be making its way through Congress, which, should it actually pass, would remove one potential catastrophe from our plate. Given your view both into the inner workings of businesses and the credit markets, I'm curious, where do you think that leaves us?
I mean, kind of more of the same. It was hard to imagine a scenario where they weren't going to sort this out. And
right.
There weren't going to be, extreme sides of both parties were going to be mad.
Although you never know.
You never know in this crazy world we're living in, Loren. But in all the things I think about and I worry about and I contemplate, whether I was right or wrong, I just kind of always assumed this was going to get sorted. The implications of it not getting sorted, I think, are just way too severe for too many people involved.
I think that was the approach of most business owners I talked to. It was impossible to even contemplate. So why contemplate it? And I think that would probably, it looks like that's going to be a good strategy, the way things are headed right now. But we're still in a challenging environment. The Wall Street Journal last week ran a story suggesting that the credit markets are tightening and banks have less capital to lend. Their rates are obviously higher. It's harder for businesses to borrow money. That's the business you're in. What are you seeing?
I read that article. I think I was actually quoted in it. And it's interesting. We work predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly in the SBA world. And we haven't seen the tightening of credit that people are talking about, at least in the sphere of the world we live in. That doesn't mean that it's not harder to get a deal funded, but it's harder to get a deal funded because it's tougher to get it to cash flow because rates are much higher. And kind of what you have to remember on a global level is that the Feds needed to slow the economy down. And it's starting to work. Maybe it took them longer than they thought. And they, by design, felt that to bring the inflation under control, they needed to slow things down a bit and create pain here and there. And it's sad, but it's the reality of the situation. We are seeing scenarios where people are running out of their idle money that kept them going for a long time. And different solutions, scenarios like that. So things are getting tighter, but I'm not sure just to pin it on the banks is necessarily the right thing to do.
I'm curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this before, but do you have a sense what percentage of your customers who come to you looking for help getting financing want that financing because they're struggling or because they're looking to grow?
Loren, the cheese keeps moving. And what you have to remember is that not too long ago, the government put about $360 billion of idle money, which is 30-year fixed money at 3.75% into the hands of entrepreneurs without proof of economic injury during COVID. Now, legitimately, there were some businesses there that were decimated in COVID and needed it, but there were plenty of businesses who got that money. Either it gave them a lifeline, they were struggling before COVID, or they were growing and they took it anyway. So it's really hard to evaluate the state of small business lending now because there was that large, significant boost on balance sheets. And I was speaking to a friend the other day who got a $500,000 idle, and his business might shut down soon. And he wanted to know if he was on the hook for it. I said, you are. Didn't make him happy. And he said,
wait, on the hook for it, even if his business shuts down?
Yeah, it's personally guaranteed debt. He's on the hook for it. And I but his business wasn't hurt by COVID at all. Maybe it was helped by COVID. And so I kind of said to him, come on, like, you got lucky with that loan. He said, we needed it to survive. I said, that's not the root of what the idle loan is all about. So there's so many balance sheets are still saturated with capital that from our perspective, it's really hard to really understand it's not an ordinary economic cycle for lots of reasons, including that.
Interesting. Are there other metrics that you watch to determine, where kind of the small business economy is headed? What do you look at to assess where things are going?
We have a temperature of what's going on with the people that are calling us for different reasons. And so we definitely have a feel for what's going on in the market. We are extremely reluctant, though, to assume that our feel represents the entire small business market for a couple of reasons. And predominantly, small business is a super hard thing, as we've talked about plenty of times, to define what that means.
Right. It means something different to everybody.
There is, I won't make fun of them, but I will, a company called Biz2Credit that regularly reports the small business credit profile, and it gets in the press somehow all the time, and they do it off of the people that come to their site to apply for credit. And my argument to that is, well, if I went to the Greyhound bus stop and asked a bunch of people about their experience for applying for small business loans and then extrapolated that into data and called that a study, it would probably be as valid as the other one. So I'm always reluctant to make assumptions that our data set, clearly we are seeing people with working capital challenges. Clearly we are seeing some people with who've run out of their idle money and are now trying to figure out what to do. Then there are plenty of businesses that are still growing and thriving and doing great. We have not seen, much to our amazement, a slowdown in the acquisition market. Still plenty of people and entrepreneurs buying businesses. So but that's what we're seeing. All I'm trying to say is that you have to be careful to assume that what we see represents the overall market.
Right. And then along those lines, speaking entirely anecdotally, I have had the sense in the business owners that I've spoken with that some of them were kind of holding back a little bit and wanted to see, we've been hearing about a recession looming for a long time, the debt ceiling thing. It just contributed to an environment where they thought maybe this isn't the time to try to expand. Let's see what happens.
But Loren, we've been hearing about a recession for
I know
for like 3 years now, and that's why, again, not to make fun of someone else, but Vistage puts ITR, like the economics forecasting experts, up on all their stages at their executive summits, and I don't read any economic forecasts anymore. I stopped reading them. Why? Tell me when in history, governments, not just us, but governments, literally printed trillions of dollars to keep people off of hunger lines and to keep people alive and to keep banks solvent and all these things. And maybe we overcorrected by 20% or 30%, and almost doesn't matter. Overcorrecting was safer than undercorrecting. But now, I wouldn't want to be the Federal Reserve today trying to figure out what to do now. The economy is so artificial. You would think.
But you are a business owner trying to figure out what to do.
I ignore it. I just go about building my business because I figure if I get so focused on the noise and so worried about all the noise around me, you can quickly become eaten up with sort of fear. I'll never forget once some folks had a call with me to talk about their business expansion plans. And it was the day after Russia invaded Ukraine, or 2 days after the call was scheduled for, and they canceled it. It was a U.S. business. They canceled the call because of their fear of the implications of the invasion of Ukraine. Or, AI is out and prevalent. Is that going to knock me out of business, or all these things? You've just got to keep your head down and keep moving and keep trying to figure out how to grow and what to do. Or because if you pay attention to all this stuff, you are, in my opinion, you'll just get lost in the quagmire. You might not agree with me, but that's how I see the world.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's worth asking the question sometimes, because you can't just ignore everything. And if the economy is in fact going into recession someday, maybe that's a great opportunity to expand your business. That certainly happens. Maybe it's not, but you kind of have to think about it and assess it, and that's why I ask about it.
But Loren, to a point, but at the same time, if you get, my only point is that, every other day somewhere in my newsfeed, I see an article that the stock market's about to crash, or this or that or the other. And you see all these different point of views. And I stopped reading it for a while because I'm like, I just got to go about building my business.
Fair enough. All right, next topic. You recently testified before Congress about looming changes that the SBA wants to make. You're, as any readers of 21 Hats know, you're not a big fan of those changes. What was the experience like testifying?
Well, testifying in front of Congress, irrespective of the issues that I'm passionate about and important about, was certainly an interesting experience. First of all, I had about 4 days notice to get ready, and it's a huge amount of work because you have to submit your oral testimony and supporting written testimony 48 hours before. And so I would say there was a good 40 or 50 hours of working all that alongside pretty crazy other things I have going on in my life. But you get to the room, and as you know, you've seen me in action, a pretty avid public speaker. And you're sort of sitting at this desk with a microphone, staring up at these women and men who keep walking in and out. They come in for their questions and they leave, and this and that and the other. And it's like, and you're wondering, like, are these freaking people listening? And why am I doing all this? So that's the cynical side of me. The other side of me was an amazing experience, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, to have the opportunity to try to influence the debate of some of the policy about what's going on in Washington.
As you've written, you're opposed to the SBA changes to the extent that they kind of bring some alternative lenders and fintechs into the SBA world and make them eligible to give SBA loans. You've talked about why you're opposed to that. Do you think anyone was listening? Do you have a sense what's going to happen?
I don't have a sense what's going to happen. I know there's an intense lobbying effort to try to slow down the train that's already left the station. I know that both Democrats and Republicans are concerned about it. But Washington, as we know, is a funny place, and things work with their own rhythm. And I'm certainly not an expert on the dynamics of the town. It is fascinating, though, to me, that I want to be clear. I'm not opposed. If this change was just, we're going to add some fintechs into the program and let some new lenders into the program, and that was it, I would say, God bless, have at it. What I'm concerned about is you're letting new lenders, non-regulated lenders, into the program, and at the same time, to make it easier for them to lend expeditiously, you are removing a good 60 to 70% of the guardrails that have supported the SBA program for decades. And so it's literally like you're taking a great lending program that has supported hundreds of thousands or millions of businesses over the years and done it without taxpayer subsidy and literally turning it into a mad science experiment.
Just in case somebody doesn't know, Ami, it's without subsidy because the SBA doesn't actually, in most cases or almost all, lend its own money. It's just guaranteeing the money, right?
That's guaranteeing, and people pay, and borrowers pay us a guarantee fee when they get the loans, and lenders also pay some fees. And also, so the SBA has not cost the taxpayer money for decades, and has been this great economic boost to the economy. Now, if you make wholesale changes all at once, and they are wholesale changes, what you do is you risk the ability to even understand what's going to happen, or where defaults might come, or where fraud might come, or this or that or the other. It's really pretty frightening to me that one lobby would somehow manage to get so much change through all at once. The other thing that's upsetting to me is that the impetus for us, which is a great goal, is to get more access into the capital, into the hands of underserved entrepreneurs. And many are tying the PPP learning experiences with the fintechs to do all this. What I would say is that you've got to be careful. First of all, PPP lending is not SBA lending in any shape or form. And I found it ironic, Loren, where some of the Congress people were drilling, particularly Tony Wilkerson from NAGLE, the Association of Government Guarantee Lenders, about the stats on SBA lending to predatory lending to underserved markets. But they don't have any data to understand what's going in that market today, because all the unregulated fintech lenders today are not required to report their loan volume. And so if you say SBA underserved volume was X 100 million or X million or whatever the number is, and it went up from this to that, you can't see it or understand it in the bigger picture of the lending and the finance market. And that was extremely frustrating to me, that it didn't seem that the Congress people had an understanding of that.
All right. Last thing, I happen to have inside word that in your upcoming 21 Hats columns over the next few weeks, you're going to be talking about several entrepreneurs facing specific, interesting challenges growing their businesses. Can you give us a little hint about where you're headed with that?
Sure. So a mentor of mine, I was chatting with him last week. He said something to me interesting. He said, mentoring entrepreneurs or coaching them is often just about, often about following their feelings. And what I find is that in many cases, entrepreneurs know what they need to do next to get their business to the next level. They're just overcome with fear about taking that step and anxiety. And it's always a hard step to make to push to the next level. And so what we're going to try to do is write a couple columns that dig into that theme, talking about one entrepreneur who's could double, triple, or quadruple their business if they had more staff. And he knows what he's got to do is he's got to get out of doing the work and get more hands in and find more people like him, which is easier said than done, to grow his infrastructure. And he's scared to do it. Another entrepreneur who knows in his heart that his bookkeeping and his accounting and his all his financial mechanisms of his business are not running well. And he needs to upgrade that, yet he feels an intense loyalty to the woman who's been with him from the beginning, who's doing that, and he's having a tough time making that change. And finally, we'll talk about another entrepreneur, and I'm not mentioning their industries or names yet because I'm still finalizing with what they're comfortable with me saying and not saying, who she's actually taken the next leap to grow her business, trying to expand it more from a regional to a national platform. And she's put people in place to do her current regional business, and she's out there trying to promote the world and build her brand nationally. And so when you're in the thick of it, she's scared, and understandably so, and dipping into her line of credit, which is not the best way to finance what she's trying to do right now. So we'll also talk about not just the fear of taking the next step, but once you decide to go all in, the fear of living through it until you get to the other side as well.
Are you going to be able to offer a solution to that problem, the fear of taking the next step?
Well, I think that part of it, and what we find is universally that most entrepreneurs don't have a really good handle on their financing and their ability to project or forecast their businesses. So one of the recommendations is to take some time to try and really understand your business model and work with a fractional CFO or somebody to help understand what your business might look like financially going forward and what the cash flow implications will be if you make that step. And maybe if you need some financing help around it, how to look at that so that we can see the broader picture. And that is definitely some of the recommendations about what to do. But I would say it again, I always say get yourself in a peer group so that you have peers who've been down that road or going through that road to support you through the process.
That sounds really interesting, Ami, really useful. I know I'm looking forward to reading those columns as soon as you actually write them.
I think I have one in your inbox.
I didn't realize that. I will take a look at that as soon as
I have the intro one in your inbox.
I'm going to read that as soon as we finish here.
Sounds good.
Ami Kassar is founder and CEO of MultiFunding, which helps businesses with their financing needs. This episode was brought to you by The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to help build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks for taking the time, Ami.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Have a great week, everyone.